Hello all, Alison here. Welcome back to Words and Pictures for another few minutes of fun. I have been fairly obsessively playing with my printed tissue paper and the PaperArtsy Mattints. So these are the transparent tinted glaze that came out, I think the first ones came out just last year from PaperArtsy. And they've taken me on a real colour adventure. Those who've been following me for years on my blog and my Instagram will know that colour is an occasional departure, but really not a regular thing that I play with. But there's something about how these matins are so subtle and transparent, like watercolours, which is another place where unexpected colours come to the fore for me, pinks and rusts and things. So they have a similar effect. And as you can see, I've just been creating these little panels using my PaperArtsy printed tissue, which is developed from the Botanical and Ephemera stamp sets that I have with PaperArtsy, and you get whole sheets of beautiful, well, I think they're beautiful, beautiful imagery and ephemera and things. The reason it looks blurry there is because there are 3 sheets in a row going on behind there, so you get these giant sheets of printed tissue. And I've just been gluing them down and having a glorious time layering up matins. So I'm going to carry on doing that today because I've been enjoying it, and I've got them at various stages. So you can see I've got some right from the beginning, I've got some where I want to add more colour detail in places. There are some that are maybe complete. Yeah, I don't know. I may not talk all the way through. We'll see how that goes. And I've been trying to think, if you haven't got matins, there are various ways you could create something, a similar effect. So that might be with watercolours, because you can create watercolour glazes over the tissue paper once you've glued it down, especially if you were to put on a clear gesso or something like that. So that would be possible. It would also be possible with various glazes that you can get. So PaperArtsy do a range of glazes. That's the satin, the matte and the pearl. There's also a gloss, but I seem to have mislaid it at the moment. But there are other glazing liquids which you could mix with your acrylic paints to create transparent glazes of colour. So that might be something to explore if you can't at the moment get your hands on any matins. The thing about these matins is they are matte, not glossy, so they are fantastic for painting over, for stamping over without that glossy sheen. So you'd be wanting to look probably for a matte glaze, unless you like things really glossy. But for me, the joy of these is they're ready to play with. I don't have to spend time mixing up glazes and so on. But I was just trying to think of ways that you could do something similar if you haven't yet got any matins in your stash. Although I have to say, I do commend them to your attention. As you'll see today, they really are quite fun. Of course, you also don't have to have my tissue paper. Obviously, I love it because it's got botanical things, but here are some of the Tim Holtz collage papers. He also created rolls and rolls of tissue paper. So I thought I'd take you right back to the beginning of the process, which is to just glue these down. You can, because this is a seal and a glaze, it will also work as a gluing medium. So you could put a layer of this underneath and let that be what glues your tissue paper down. I just prefer to start from a blank canvas of white. So you could apply matint to your background card before gluing this down. You can even apply it to the back of the tissue paper before gluing it down. Personally, and this is purely personal preference, I like having the blank canvas to start with. So I usually start with just some decoupage glue, or you can put a bit of water into acrylic glue to just thin it a little bit. In fact, I might thin that just a little bit. I'm just putting some extra water into there. And then it's just a question of, this is just some plain white card, really doesn't matter. It's quite cheap white card that I picked up in some sale sometime, somewhen. and glue it down. You can use distress collage medium, whatever glue you happen to have around. I, of course, thoroughly embrace getting some wrinkles in my gluing. Not if the thing is not glued down at all. You do need enough glue to get an attachment between the two bits of paper, but I'm very happy if there are occasional wrinkles in that, because for my money that just adds to the detail and the texture and the delight. If you're somebody that likes to get things fully, you know, smooth and beautiful and perfect, then by all means spend the time doing that. I would rather get on to painting things and colouring things and yeah, all that bit. So I'm not hugely bothered if there are some wrinkles. In fact, I like it. That bit there is a little bit annoying, but you can sometimes sort of, because the tissue paper is so permeable, you can sometimes get it wet enough and glued enough. If you've got a bubble of air that is bothering you, you can sometimes manage that down into submission. So this time I'm experimenting with putting a bit of spritz of water onto the paper so that I can just get that glue to really spread out. And because the tissue paper is so light, that should be enough to get a good adhesion and should maybe give me a better result in terms of not so many air bubbles, because I've managed to get that paper fully saturated with the gluing medium. Even though it's a moister gluing medium, that's all good. So there we are. I'm going to leave those to dry while we start with something else, but they'll come into action a little bit later on. The brush that has had the glue on, I'm going to make sure that goes straight into a jar of water so that I don't dry the bristles of my brush, although it does happen. I forget and off we go. Grand. So let's put those to one side. That is just a simple cheap decoupage glue. The bottle of it burst at one point, and so I just transferred it into a jar. Let's just check we're not. Grand. So yeah, as you can see, I've been enjoying all sorts of colours that aren't usually at the top of my list. The oranges, the pinks, and the newest colours added to the Mattint range are these three neons. I am completely obsessed with these two. I've yet to really make friends with High Vis, but Acid and Mojito are both a joy to play with. And even though, as I say, they look so full on in the jar, in the pot, in the bottle, it's a bottle, there we are, they have a real subtlety once they land up on the paper, and then you can just kind of build and grow your layers in a really subtle way. So just a cheap craft brush. This is one of those Swedish store children's brushes, and just watch what happens as I just layer in the very subtle sunshine of Acid. And then I'm going to maybe put some of the Mojito down here. And as you can see at the moment, there's really nothing much to that colour. This is what happens when you build up layers and layers and layers. But at the first instance, you get a really gloriously subtle effect. So there's no Mojito here. That's a layer of the Dragonfly going over the Acid, and already I've got that lovely ombre going on from the blue to a soft green to the Acid. But that's because layering these up is the same as mixing the colours. So it's like a magical kind of way to mix on the paper. I'm going to make sure I've got some kitchen towel available so that when I want to, I can just clean off the brush a bit. That's just in a jam jar of water there. If you heard that. Oh, there's something under my mat here. That jam jar of water is very crooked. Let's not have that because we don't want it falling. Oh, it's another brush, look. I wondered where that had got to. So I'm going to go with a little more of the Mojito down here. And I'm going to go with a little more of the acid through the middle. So I do seem to have slightly ripped my paper here, but that's all fine, it's all good. A little bit more of the Dragonfly up here. And as you can see, that gradual building is something that somehow just encourages me then to be a little bit of a daredevil, because I know that it's unlikely that I'm going to overdo it with one coat. It just gives me a chance to, put a little bit of, yeah, sunrise in there. So that's squeezed going on, which is the sort of orange tone. And just build that with real subtlety. And you can see that that's, then if I take that over the Dragonfly, where the Dragonfly is, that's going to deepen that tone and give me a kind of brownishness going on. I might even go so far as to get the pink out. Some of these are really fluid, so just watch out when you shut the lids again. Quite often a little bit just spatters out, which can be a really nice thing if you happen to want. So here, watch what happens when I put the pink over all of this. You get that incredible blending of the subtle colour, giving you an ombre across where it was Mojito, where it was acid, where it was Dragonfly. And that, I mean, that's just a kind of magic, isn't it? It's a pity about this, but you know, I can stick a metal embellishment over there. I can deal with that. You can, of course, also mix these on the mat. So that's now the pink and squeezed just doing duty together to give me even more of a sort of sunrise glow coming from the bottom part of that. And then again, if you decide you want to refresh that sense of the acid in the middle, you absolutely can. And you can see that that intensifies where that was happening. And bring it back over here to just layer down. And the more layers you put in, the more beauty, the more glow you seem to end up with. It's really astonishing, because when you work with watercolours, yes, they have a clear layering glazing effect. I think I may have mentioned this before when working with the Mattints. But at some point, you do run the risk of mud. It sort of seems to almost inevitably happen. I want a little bit more depth to my blue, I think. So this is River Deep, which is a beautiful darker blue, almost with a greenish tone to it, greenish grey blue, which obviously means I like it. And I'm just going to put a touch of that over this top corner. And bring it in. I'm enjoying that quite a lot. I might let that dry and then just see how I feel about it later on. So I've got this lovely pink on the mat at the moment, which again looks really, really full on. But if I take it and just add it to here, you can see that it actually has that ability to be a really subtle layer of pink. There you go, fine. Or if you then build up the layers, and I think we might work with a bit of glow here, which does exactly what it says on the tin. It will add a glow. I'm going to put some acid back on the mat because I'm enjoying exploring with acid because it's one of the newer colours. I'm going to have some squeezed. Oh, hello. So that was the very liquid, the squeezed. Did you see that just flick out there? I might even go so far as to get some Ladybug red. See, this is where regulars who know me will just be going, wow. But this is what the Mattints have done to me. They've made me go in colourful directions that I would never usually have considered. So I'm going to come, I mean, yellow and pink. Who said? What have you done with Alison? and look what happens at that place where the acid and the pink are meeting, and I'm getting again just that glorious kind of sunshine tone. I'm going to intensify it with the glow, and as you can see, that puts that sort of warm honey glow right into the mix. I'm going to come back in with a bit more pink down here, because as you can see, as soon as you build layers of the colour, you're just giving it a chance to really pop. Let's bring in a bit of Ladybug from the bottom. The colours are just so exciting to play with. But as I say, it's been a way to bring colour into my world, more colour. I mean, I have in the past played with colour. It's not true to say I've never had colour going on. There have been adventures in colour, but this somehow has made me bold. Because as I say, it's really hard to overdo it. But you can create an ombre that is really so fine and subtle and gorgeous. I might put a little bit more pink in this top corner. And I've always loved an ombre. It's one of the things I maybe love most about working with inks and with watercolours, is that ability to create a drift of colour from one shade to another, from one depth to another, from one tone to another, from light to dark, from green to blue, from grey to brown. That movement of colour from one place to another. It's another form of journey. It's another form of storytelling. So again, I can let that dry, and I love it just like that. I mean, I love that simplicity of just the black and white image, the black sketching line of the image. This is the jam, and I'm just because I can, wanting to explore, putting a bit of that. Sorry, the brush is a bit wet. I need to dry that off. I just want to see what happens if I add a little bit of depth down here in this bottom corner. And maybe again. So you see what I mean? It doesn't, on the first go, oh, look at it over the yellow down in that corner. And I'm thinking maybe, so some of this tissue paper is coming up. I, to be perfectly honest, don't know why that's happening. It hasn't happened on any of the others that I've played with. So that's a bit of River Deep, just creating some twilight dusk coming up from the bottom. I haven't even put that on the mat. I'm just dipping into what's on the lid here. That's really interesting. That's maybe, I don't know, maybe because I had the water, maybe that's causing the tissue paper to just come up a little bit. Maybe I was just over enthusiastic. But I mean, look at the ombre on that, from that dusk to dawn kind of effect. So our ones that we glued at the beginning must be ready, and then once I've got these on the go, I'll do a little bit of painting over the tops of these so you can see what it's like to then just, if you want to, bring some of the images into a more colourful present place. So the subtle glow, for instance, that I've added to those berries, even over the ombre in the background, or here with that flower, I want to add a little bit of River Deep or something around this corner at the moment. So I'll show you also that even after something has dried and is ready to play, you might think, you can still go back and go, oh no, I do want to put a couple more layers of colour onto this. So I love these butterflies. I've loved these butterflies on Tim Holtz papers ever since ever. So I love that they're now also there as a collage paper. So since I was saying let's have some River Deep here, I'm going to pop that onto the mat, and I might move on from River Deep into some slightly more conventional Alison colours on these two, with maybe some blues and browns and greys, because they also exist in the Mattint world. Yes, they do. You see what happened there as that River Deep went on? Just that darkening of the sky. Incredible subtlety, but a really powerful effect nonetheless. Might want a little bit more of that going on, maybe around here. And the framing of how that then brings the eye in is just magic. So that depth of colour coming in from the outside, little straggly bits, is something really quite special, I think. Because it makes the sunshine in the middle pop all the more. It's that thing of contrast. The art of contrast. One more little stripe of it. So even after I thought something was finished, that little extra layer is just making me deeply happy. Let's take a bit of that, and look at the pure River Deep. I mean, that's a beautiful colour just by itself. Excuse me. This is maybe my favourite. So for all that I'm saying I love colour adventures, Ash is a glorious, glorious Mattint, because what it gives you is sort of pure vintage paper. So if I put the Ash over this ephemera sheet, just the subtlety of that. And again, I can build layers of Ash to get a little bit more vintage. I mean, it's quite similar to pumice stone, which is probably maybe my all-time favourite distress colour. Grey. How exciting is that? So let's go with a little bit more of the River Deep. I'm going to try and stay subtle on this one. I'm going to try and resist the impulse to go bold neon pink, although there may be some jam to be had. This is Shark, which is another absolute beauty for me, a really subtle grey blue. I love the Shark as well. So it's not that you have to suddenly become a colour fiend because you're using Mattints. If the subtler versions are something that appeals to you, that's also possible here. So just letting that be a nice vintage kind of a game. Maybe I'm really tempted just to see what happens if I put a little bit of squeezed, because I can, because there's nothing wrong with that. Oh, and you see what that gives me is the equivalent of dirty wash. So Quin Gold and Payne's Grey, in terms of vintage colours, give you an amazing kind of weathered, aged paper look. And squeezed and the Shark and the Ash and that River Deep are doing a really good job of just giving me what's called a dirty wash in paint, that you can just go over a thing and give it a vintage look just with a simple coat of that. On this one, I'm going to leave that for a second and come back to it, because at the moment I'm really enjoying the subtleness of that. I'm going to come in with some Shark from the top because it's here, and I'm quite enjoying that sort of, again, the vintage. It's Tim Holtz, he does it. And there we are, couldn't resist it. It was sitting there on the mat. Let's go in with the pink. So I said I wasn't going to talk today. As you can hear, it's slightly causing me to need to clear my throat, but I think we'll get through. So again, just letting those colours play with each other. Quite inclined to go with the Ash again, just for that vintage grey tone. Let's bring it in here. And I think I might want a little bit more of the pink. and maybe beef it up a little bit with some ladybird. What do we think? Ladybug, beg her pardon. In English, a ladybug is a ladybird. Ladybug is the American term, so I'm actually not going to apologise for calling ladybug ladybird. Yeah, so this is ladybug or bird and squeezed, which I'm just going to add to the mix here. And it takes you from sort of one-dimensional, the pink, to a glorious multi-dimensional colour. I think that's partly what it is. It's that you keep the sense of the colours that are underneath, but you get the extra boost of colour from whatever you've just put over the top. But then they both live in the colour that you end up with. They're both somehow present and informing that layered sense of colour that you've got. So I'm putting some more of the pink over because I just wanted to beef that up again. And that's just beautiful as well. Going to come in with a bit more, maybe sharp, maybe river deep from the bottom, just to intensify the shadow down here. Come on, there you go. So bringing that back to the blues. Maybe come up this side a little with it. So that over this corner, we're getting that lovely collision of colours. And you can see why there's really probably no substitute for this. By all means, give it a go with distress inks, with watercolours, with, as I suggested, the glazing liquids. But for ease and playfulness, I'm finding this a really incredible journey to go on. I'm thinking I want some Dragonfly, maybe, onto this one. Just coming in maybe from down here. So I'm trying to prove the point about it is possible to have subtle vintage colours on these. But it's kind of, I'm getting carried away again, because that's how these mediums affect me. I do like that though. I do like that vintage burnished look. I'm maybe going to put some more ash over that. Grand. So while I've got some of these colours on the mat, I'm going to set these aside to dry. Running out of drying space now, as is often the way. So I have been doing mop-ups with these, which is also really fun. Sometimes I'm mopping up using a little scrap of the tissue paper that's just lying around. So just dip that into whatever's on here and stick it straight down onto a piece of paper. Let's do that so you can see what I'm talking about. So I can just take a scrap of this, dip it into whatever's on the mat, and I can do that with a spritz of water to start with or not. So here you'll see the gluing properties of this medium. So on this one there was very little on the mat and lots of water, so really, really pale. This one was somewhere in between. This one, as you can see, is going to be fairly full on, and then I can just glue it. That is glue, that will be glued to the piece of card, and then I've got a little panel that I could stick into an art journal page, use it as layering, use it as a little bit of collage, or you give this another little spritz of colour, spritz of water, and you can pick it up just onto a tag background. I've got some of those around. This was just a scrap of card that picked up lots of colour the other day. So even the mop-ups are fun, but while I've got a little bit of colour on the mat, I'm going to use that to add, yeah, I'm going to add a little glow to these berries here. And again, you'll see that the layering of colour is a really subtle game to start with, because we're going over all sorts of ombres and things in the background. And so the pink, although what I'm putting on here is basically the pink, there's a bit of the squeezed, I think, in there as well. Because of the colour as it's going over, you get a real variation of colour on that. But it's just letting those images come to life. I can also, with what I've got on the mat here, the Dragonfly, I might just highlight this bit of ephemera a little bit, just draw the eye's attention to it. Just layering up a bit of colour through there. And again, because that dragonfly is going over shades of yellow and orange, you're getting a sort of soft grey to it as opposed to the full-on. Again, it's just picking out those details. You can also, the other thing I have been doing a lot of is use some of the, I mean, you could absolutely use opaque paints. I've mostly been using either semi-opaques or translucent fresco finish paints to add fine detailing. So this is French Roast, an old favourite. It's a semi-opaque, and with a spritz of water it will become basically translucent. So I can just use that to add my little berry stems in there. I had something else that needed some stems doing. Where was that? Oh, yeah, quite like to get this branch going. And then with something like these blossoms, so you can see I'm keeping this fairly see-through, because one of the things I adore, the other thing I adore, as you will have heard from me before about these Mattints, is that it means I can paint over both a tissue image or a stamped image without losing any of the detail of that image, because they are so completely transparent. The image in the background stays put. But if I've got, for instance, these blossoms now, these blossom heads, which I would quite like to have as, this is the original blackthorn stamp on the tissue paper rather than the new apple blossom. So these would be white if it's blackthorn, but also most blossom is, lots of blossom is just white, let's face it. So if I want to give these a little bit more of a chance to be white, I can absolutely do that. So here's a fully opaque Snowflake. You've met Snowflake before. But if I am very careful, so using the Mattints, I can go over the image and not worry. If I give myself a sort of slightly careful, more careful painting of this, I can add white to these petals without losing the lines underneath, just by colouring a bit more carefully. The Mattints mean I don't have to paint that carefully, which I like about them. They save me the trouble of being careful, of taking time, but sometimes it's also nice to take time. So I'm just adding a little bit of white to these flower buds, and I'm, for the most part, staying within the lines. If I've gone over the lines too much, because I've got the paint in a watery mix, I will have time to just pull back and get the line back. But as long as I'm reasonably careful about where I'm putting that white paint, I can just bring these blossom heads into a kind of light focus against the background. I've got water spritzed next to my white paint here, so I can choose whether to go into the bit that is fully paint or pick up a bit of water from here. So I can really be quite flexible with how fluid the paint I'm choosing to put on the brush is. I'm letting it be fairly fluid at the moment, but as you see, that means that I can, if I feel like it's gone too much over the image, I can pull back. In the places where there are no stamens to worry about, then I can be a bit freer, or I can just go over those stamens and then again knock it back. I could always come in with some pen work later to refresh the detailing as well. The options are endless. There is no wrong, there's no mistakes, there's playing, and there's adding colour and brightness to your life. A little bit of pleasure and delight in a world that is sorely in need of such things at the moment. So, and then once I've got that white background, I can then choose to go back in with some of the Mattints and add blushes of colour to my blossom. So obviously, in my original colour obsessions, I would probably have just stuck with the white and been very happy to have white blossom. These days, my brain is already going, ooh, what happens if we put the pink over this, or even some Ladybug, to just let those blossom petals start to blush. You can see I'm now coming over again to get myself a little bit more definition to those petals, to that white glow of the blossom against the sky. But it's really up to you. The subtle version was also good, but I'm sort of feeling like I want some glowing bright blossom to go with my glowing bright colours. So the greens on here are again done with a combination of Mattint and Fresco paint. So Hey Pesto, which is a translucent green, is in the mix here, but I think I also mixed it with some Mojito and probably some Fern. Oh, we haven't used the Fern at all today. So again, I'm just going to let that dry. I'm going to maybe add a touch of colour to these berries. Oh look, while I've got the French roast, that was the other branch I wanted to do. So that's French roast with a touch of water. There is also a brown Mattint, that's Nutty, and it's quite a sort of, I suppose I would say a pinky brown, but nothing wrong with having a bit of that on the mat as well, so that we could, I mean, maybe it would be quite good on the berries themselves with a touch of the pink. Nah, not so keen on that. Let's knock it back. See, easily done. Knock it back. And yeah, I'm just gonna finish up these branches. So as you can see, I could do this for hours. It's a meditative, gentle layering process. The layering of colour, the tinting of the images. There's a good example of what it's like to be able to have a translucent paint but keep the detail of the stamping underneath. So that little bit of knotty branch there has stayed beautifully available and visible. So I could put a touch more green onto these leaves, just layer up some more colour to give them a bit more definition. Now that those branches are filled in, that's kind of drawing my eye and saying let's have a bit more green. So let's pop a bit of the Hey Pesto onto the mat. And you can see I'm working in tiny amounts. These paints will last a long time. And that's a bit of Fern going down next to it. But for now I'm going to put on the translucent Hey Pesto, and so you can see that translucent paint also allows me to keep the detail behind, particularly if I give it a spritz of water, or particularly if I give it just a little mix with the Fern Mattint. So that's going to give me that real transparent glaze. So for now they're all in the same colour. But then if I take a little bit of, where's my lovely dark green? Greenstone, I can add some shadow to some of those leaves to just give a little variation in the layers. I'll let it dry, let it dry, let it dry. I'm sure I can use this somewhere else in the meantime. La la la. Yes, look over here. Let's layer up a little bit over this leaf here. So again, it's a really subtle first layer, but it's just starting to let that leaf have a bit of definition against the background. I'm going to come in with the French roast while it's here. Add in my branches. I do love a good branch. That's why Twiggy was such a good stencil for me. It's given me branches galore. I can have as many branches as I like now with my Twiggy stencil. do love a good gnarly branch, and the knots and the kind of the buds growing out of it, getting ready to be new branches. Little touches of that and the nutty maybe on these acorns. Just let those colours start to build. So I hope you can see what a sort of gentle, lovely thing this is to be doing. So this one, unless I were to put white paint over it, that's never going to be a fully green leaf. I would have to go with really quite a lot of layers of green to get this to be a full-on green leaf, but that's fine. I'm really interested in the subtle gradations of colour and just allowing things to maybe not be their natural colours for a change. I've spent a long time doing sort of botanical colouring and painting of these images, so to spend a bit of time letting leaves not be green, I think is quite good for me. It's another little colour adventure. I've just noticed there's another bit of leaf down here, so I'm just gonna, oh look, that's lots of green thick on the brush. So that can be done as well. Oh yeah, well now I like that. So that's what I mean. See, my naturalistic brain does kick in as soon as there is green on a leaf and go, oh, well that's the right colour. But of course leaves throughout the year can be any number of colours. And you get those lovely blue, grey, silvery foliages. So yeah, it's as I said, encouraging me to push the colour boat out a little bit. I'm wondering what happens if I were to go with maybe some glow and some squeak. Oh, well, no, if I mix the glow with the pink that is here, I will get something similar to squeezed. I just want to see what this does over the blue-grey sky behind. I think it's just going to give them a little boost. Again, just to draw the eye to the fact that the berries are there, rather than to make the berries be a specific colour. To just let them have a bit of presence. I'm going to have to make myself stop. Because the other phrase that happens a lot when I'm playing with these is, as you just heard, I wonder what would happen if, and for me that's one of the most inviting, exciting phrases you can have in a creative process. I wonder, what if, and you know, yes, you can absolutely ask somebody else, what if, but actually it's far more fun to just go and what if yourself and find out, what if I add a little blush of colour now to the centres of these blossoms, and then just let it blend out. I can put a slightly more intense colour right in the centre to get some depth, so I can layer up colour into the middle of these to my heart's content. I can let one petal be a little bolder. I can knock it back if I'm not enjoying what's happening. I'm going to put another touch of colour right in the middle there. And some of these buds could also just choose to be pinkish. Just little hints of colour, of the colour that's to come. Knock that one back. And then, yeah, well, I think I'm going to go for a little dot of glow where I can see those stamens, just really subtly done. There's a little bit of Ladybug in that one as well. Oh yes, I like the slightly pinker stamens, I think. These I'm being quite loose with, because as those stamens move in the wind, they're quite loose and flexible, and you get that kind of sense of movement. Let's maybe put a touch of colour down the middle of there, maybe a touch of colour in there, maybe a touch of colour in the middle of there. Okay, make me stop. Somebody stop me. Just letting that dance against the sky. Lovely. So as you can see, I've got lots more that I can come back and play with. I've got some that I just am enjoying in a... Oh, there it goes. There's a mop up. Look at that. That's let's just wipe that before I put it down on something that I mind about. Don't mind what's on the back of there. I'm going to do a little bit of spattering because of course that's also an option. So little dip of the brush. I've got all this lovely bluey browny stuff going on the mat here, even the greenstone, and I'm just gonna do a little bit of that over that one because that's enjoyable. I might add a little bit of that over this one because that's enjoyable. Little speckles. Which other one might I want it on? Ooh, maybe a little bit on here. So again, it's just about getting a sort of inkiness and a freshness of that movement. I could even, hello, a little bit of the white will give me a little highlight. So I'm just mixing that with what's on the mat, sort of grey-green. That's rather pleasurable. Just that little hint of white spatter. Might do a touch of that over here as well. Nice. Maybe on this one. Quite enjoying that grey-green. And so with this, I'm going to see if have I got a piece of card sitting around? Yes, I have. There we go. So I'm just going to do a really subtle pickup over here of those pinky glow affairs. Look at that, just a really subtle glow of... I'm putting the water on the paper this time so that you can see that there are always options. Pick up those soft greens and browns. That's something I could die cut with flower stems or little birds, whatever it might be. Always worth getting a mop up with whatever's on the mat at the end. Pick up a bit of the nutty in the middle. See, that's got a really nice texture to it. And then I sort of, where else? I'm running out of space to put things now. The other thing I can do is just prep a little bit of the leftover tissue paper for future use. So I quite like doing that, particularly in the neutral tones, because that's just one, again, I can stick into an art journal page just to start off some texture, start off with something so it's not a blank page. I don't have to stick it down at this point. If I lie it down this way up, then I'll be able to let that dry and it's just ready to place. So I'm going to dive in for a close-up of where we've got to so far. I hope you've enjoyed that little bit of colour playtime. As I say, if you don't have the Mattints, there are ways. Have an explore with what you do have in your stash. See how you can layer up colour and glazing and all that kind of business. And yeah, if you do get a chance to have a play with the Mattints, I really commend them to your attention as a lovely addition to your mediums in your stash. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm always delighted to have your company, to hear your thoughts in the comments down below. I will put in the description as many details of what we've been playing with as I possibly can. And I look forward to having your company again here on the channel. Hang around for the close-up and happy crafting all.